In 1517, a Catholic priest named Martin Luther protested corruption within the Catholic Church Holy Roman Empire, thus sparking the Protestant Reformation. This caused Protestant kingdoms to eventually break away from the Catholic Church Holy Roman Empire, and the Catholic Church responded by reopening the Holy Office of the Inquisition witch hunt. The Catholic Church then labeled each value of the Protestant Reformation as heresy. A handicapped ex-soldier Catholic fanatic named Ignatius Loyola had created a military intelligence organization within the Catholic Church called the Jesuit priesthood, for the purpose of fighting the Reformation, and to conquer the world in the name of Catholicism. The Jesuits spread out all over the world, built schools, trained the children of Catholic nobility, and became popular court confessors. Being court confessors meant that the Jesuits were responsible for giving religious advice to Catholic monarchs, and the Jesuits used these positions to instigate brutal religious imperialist wars during the Catholic anti-Reformation. The Jesuits were persecuted and kicked out of many countries for this behavior, until the government of France demanded that Pope Clement XIV ban the Jesuits completely. Clement knew that this would kill him, but he eventually gave in. Clement agreed that the Jesuits were a perpetual threat to the peace, and in 1773, he banned the Jesuits for eternity, putting their general in prison. The Jesuits were disbanded from almost every country that they were in, and Pope Clement XIV died a slow painful death, from poisoning, soon thereafter. In 1776, a Jesuit-trained individual named Adam Weishaupt created a group called the Bavarian Illuminati. Weishaupt claimed to hate the Jesuits, and he modeled the Illuminati after the Jesuit structure. The goal of the Illuminati was to gain control of the most powerful men in the world, and to create its own global government called the New World Order. The Illuminati was founded on May 1st, and its stated goals were also very similar to communist propaganda: the abolition of monarchies, the abolition of order government, the abolition of private property, the abolition of nationalism, the abolition of marriage, the abolition of religion, the communal education of children. The Illuminati grew through Freemasonic lodges, until it had more than 3,000 members. The Illuminati was itself outlawed, when the Duke of Bavaria had learned of Weishaupt's plots. The Illuminati then secretly worked through Freemasons to covertly spearhead the French Revolution, through a group called the Jacobins. Revolutionaries executed the King of France, many French Catholic officials, and also many expendable Freemasons. Freemason Napoleon Bonaparte I attacked the Papal States, and took the Pope hostage, who died shortly thereafter. Napoleon then became the dictator of revolutionary France, when his Jesuit-trained handler, Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, organized a coup on his behalf. The next pope that Napoleon took hostage crowned Napoleon emperor, and decided to restore the Jesuit order during his captivity in France. The Jesuit order is the intelligence wing of the Illuminati. The next main group in the Illuminati power structure is the Zionists. Zionism is the philosophy of Jewish racial supremacy and international subjugation, which traces its roots back to ancient Egypt, and a mystical text known as the Kabbalah. A Zionist banker named Mayer Rothschild made the first modern international bank, after sending each of his 5 sons to a major European capital, to create his own branch. Rothschild made its fortunes financing all sides of conflicts, and Rothschild vessels were the only ships allowed to pass back and forth through the channel between Britain and France during the Napoleonic Wars. Nathan Rothschild, who was positioned in Britain, used inside information on the outcome of the Battle of Waterloo, to spread false information, and created an artificial collapse of the London Stock Exchange. Nathan then bought most of Britain's whole economy for pennies on the dollar, and was then able to take control of Britain's central bank. This gave Nathan complete dominance over Britain's entire economy, and Rothschild agents have since conspired to create privately and publicly owned central banks all over the world, so that Zionism may perpetually exploit the economies of all nations. Zionism is the financial wing of the Illuminati, and Rothschild Bank has been the bank of the Catholic Church since at least 1823. After civil war broke out in America in 1861, between the North and the South, over the issues of trade tariffs and slavery, then the President of the North, Abraham Lincoln, blamed the Jesuits for making war possible. He claimed that the war could never have happened if the Jesuits had not promised Catholic support to the South. Lincoln was also at great odds with the U.S. banking community, as he'd had Congress print a national currency, and was attacking the powers of the banks. Lincoln was assassinated 5 days after the war had ended. Rothschild's American agents had been in a constant struggle with the United States government to steal control over the money supply of the American people, ever since America's inception. These conspirators managed to accomplish this in a permanent sense in the year 1913, when the Federal Reserve Act was passed, while most of Congress was gone on Christmas break. They then set about illegally passing the 16th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, without the required 3/4 of states ratifying it, so that they could illegally tax Americans through the IRS, also stealing their wages, which the illegitimate 16th Amendment does not even describe as being taxable anyways. One of Rothschild's American agents was the political handler of U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, and his name was Colonel Edward Mandell House. Colonel House had a discussion with the British Foreign Secretary regarding what would prompt the U.S. to join World War I on the side of Britain, and House stated that if the Germans sank an ocean liner carrying many American citizens, then that would be sufficient. The British luxury liner, Lusitania, was sunk soon thereafter by a German U-boat, and it had many Americans on board. The Lusitania was a prime military target because it was carrying 6 million rounds of ammunition, supplied by Rothschild's American agent, J.P. Morgan. This helped push America into joining World War I in 1917, and then the British government also gave British Lord Walter Rothschild approval for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, in a document known as the Balfour Declaration. Rothschild's American agent Jacob Schiff financed Russian revolutionaries Leon Trotsky and Vladimir Lenin. The Bolshevik Revolution ensued in 1917, and communism was created. Lenin became the dictator of the Soviet Union, and when he died in 1924, then Leon Trotsky engaged Joseph Stalin in a power struggle over who would succeed him. Trotsky was a proponent of global socialist revolution, while Stalin was interested in a national Soviet empire. Joseph Stalin won the power struggle, and temporarily stifled the Zionists. An American named Irving Kristol would become an avid follower of Leon Trotsky, and Irving Kristol is the father of modern-day American neoconservatism. Rothschild's American agents created a group called the Council on Foreign Relations in 1921, for the purpose of spreading U.S. imperialism and socialist propaganda. The CFR is the sister organization of a British group called the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which had evolved from a group that Rothschild's British associates had created in 1902, for the purpose of spreading British imperialism and socialist propaganda. Many of the most powerful people in America attend the CFR, and work together to create a new world order. The 12 private U.S. Federal Reserve banks engineered the collapse of the New York Stock Exchange in the year 1929, and the ensuing worldwide economic depression also. The masses lost most of their wealth, which was then transferred to the super-rich. In 1932, the royal dictatorship of Saudi Arabia was created, by the support of the British Empire. Extremist Islam, Wahhabi, was given control of the two most holy cities in all of Islam, Mecca and Medina, which promoted strife within Islam, and also the eventual clash of civilizations. The Saudi royal family has always maintained very close ties with the British Empire. In 1933, Hitler was appointed the Chancellor of Germany, and a communist set the German parliament building, Reichstag, on fire. Hitler blamed a greater communist Zionist conspiracy, and declared a national state of emergency, thus soon achieving complete dictatorial power over Germany. An SA officer by the name of Adolf Rau came forward and stated that Nazi commandos assisted in the arson, and Hitler's SS and Gestapo later murdered Adolf Rau. The Nazi Party had originally evolved from a German occult fraternity known as the Thule Society, and the Nazi Party also received support from an American occult fraternity known as Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is a Yale University fraternity that was founded in 1832 by international opium smuggling dynasties. Every year, 15 sons of the most powerful Eastern establishment families are picked to join this occult order, whose purpose is to rule America, while it perpetually revolves around international drug smuggling and intelligence communities. George W. Bush's grandfather, Prescott Bush, was a Jesuit-trained Skull and Bones member, and was involved in a 1933 plot to overthrow the United States government, and install a Nazi-style dictatorship. Prescott Bush also helped finance a company called IG Farben during World War II, and IG Farben was the industrial giant at the heart of the Nazi war machine. IG Farben was in business with John D. Rockefeller Jr., and John D. Rockefeller Jr. was an American Rothschild agent. Allied bombers avoided bombing IG Farben buildings, and they only sustained 15% damage total throughout World War II. John D. Rockefeller Jr. had also worked very closely with the government of Britain to alter American public opinion in order for America to join World War II. United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt worked with these warmongers, and blockaded Japan in order to provoke an attack. He placed warships in a position that was known to be vulnerable, and covered up Japan's warning that it would attack Pearl Harbor. Rothschild's network of international bankers financed both sides of World War II, and made astronomical profits, while tens of millions of people died. Zionists also used their diplomatic powers to make sure that the Nazis murdered millions of innocent Jewish people, because that gave the Zionists an effective political platform to create the State of Israel. The creation of Israel solidified the power of the Zionists, and was also necessary for the Illuminati, because the Jesuits are following the ancient Judeo-Christian Roman prophecy of Revelation. For Armageddon to occur as planned, then Israel must first exist, before it can finally be destroyed. This is when the Antichrist is expected to rule the world under Lucifer, from his throne in the city of Jerusalem. Hitler had risen to power with the support of the Catholic Church, also signing a Concordat with the administration of Pope Pius XI, which would outline how the two powers would work together. Hitler greatly admired the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, and he modeled his own organization after its structure. Hitler's elite private army, the SS, was modeled after the Jesuit order. Hitler considered the captain of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, to be his Ignatius Loyola, and Hitler considered himself to be the Pope of Nazi Germany. The SS captain Heinrich Himmler was a member of the occult Thule Society, and his uncle was a Jesuit priest. Father Himmler was a core SS administrator, and though he was arrested at Nuremberg, he died of unspecified causes before he could ever stand trial. The third main group in the Illuminati power structure is the Knights of Malta. The Knights of Malta are a Catholic organization, but they also work with non-Catholic organizations that share their names. The Knights of Malta are considered a sovereign entity by the United Nations Sovereign Military Order of Malta, and they trace their history back to the Catholic Crusades against Islam. Aristocratic dynasties, commonly referred to as the Black Nobility, administer the Knights of Malta, and the Knights of Malta are the military wing of the Illuminati. Hitler also rose to power with the support of British King Edward VIII and his family, and the figurehead of Britain is in charge of the Venerable Order of St. John, which is the British Protestant version of the Knights of Malta. Knights of Malta were in charge of three powerful intelligence agencies during World War II. William Donovan was in charge of the American OSS. Reinhard Gehlen was in charge of Nazi intelligence on the Eastern Front. And Prince Anton Turkel was in charge of Soviet intelligence. After World War II, the Knights of Malta smuggled Nazi war criminals out of Germany, along with the Vatican, through its infamous rat lines. The Knight of Malta, William Donovan, is considered to be the father of the United States CIA, and the CIA was modeled after the Central Intelligence Service of Hitler's SS. The Knight of Malta, Allen Dulles, was the first director of the CIA, and Allen Dulles was in charge of Operation Paperclip, which smuggled Nazi war criminals into the United States in order to utilize their talents. The Soviet Union also adopted Nazi war criminals for the same purpose. As the Cold War between communism and capitalism took shape, the United Nations was set up after World War II for the supposed purpose of facilitating harmony amongst nations. The United Nations works closely with a New Age group known as the Aquarian Age Community in order to promote one world religion for the New World Order. The United Nations also publishes its propaganda through a New Age publishing company called Lucy's Trust, and Lucy's Trust was originally called Lucifer's Publishing Company. In 1943, a congressional investigation into the activities of certain large American tax-exempt foundations was launched. This investigation was known as the Reece Committee. Investigators discovered that certain large American tax-exempt foundations were abusing their tax-exempt status to actively subvert the constitutional republic of the United States of America. Rockefeller Institute was found to be intentionally using its grant-making abilities for the express purpose of migrating the United States school system over to the values of the Soviet Empire, by funding specific historians who would enable this transition. The Reece Committee was terminated prematurely, under false accusations of anti-Semitism. In 1945, Prins Bernhard of the Netherlands became the first chairman of a group known as Bilderborg. Bilderborg consists of many of the most powerful people in the world, and meets every year under great secrecy, in order to promote a new world order. Prince Bernhard had also been a spy for Hitler's SS, worked for IG Farben, and was a member of the Order of St. John. The United States war in Vietnam began to take shape in 1955, when New York's Cardinal Spellman worked closely with the CIA, and installed an oppressive Catholic regime in South Vietnam. Spellman also called for greater United States involvement in Vietnam. United States President John F. Kennedy ordered the CIA to overthrow this regime, and also ordered the removal of 1,000 American troops from the region, shortly before he was assassinated. John F. Kennedy also signed his own death warrant by printing United States Treasury notes and threatening to dismantle the CIA. The Knight of Malta, John A. McCone, was the director of the CIA during this time, and United States involvement in Vietnam escalated when the CIA pretended that an American warship had been attacked by North Vietnamese torpedo boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. The region around Vietnam is known as the Golden Triangle because it is one of the most productive opium heroin producing areas in the world. The CIA smuggled opium heroin in the area with its Air America Front Corporation, and these activities peaked during the Vietnam War. In 1979, a group of large granite tablets were anonymously erected in Georgia. These tablets are known as the Georgia Guidestones, and are inscribed with various New Age messages in various languages. The Georgia Guidestones call for humanity to reduce its population to 500 million people, 1/12 of the current world population, in perpetual balance with nature. The pseudonym, R.C. Christian, takes responsibility for the structure, which was more than likely created by a sect known as the Rosicrucians. The creator of the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, was closely associated with Rosicrucianism. In 1981, a Freemasonic lodge in Italy known as P2 was exposed. P2 had many of the most powerful men in Italy amongst its members, and it was found to be engaging in a conspiracy to covertly overthrow the government of Italy, to create its own fascist state. P2 was also connected to a CIA operation known as Gladio, which used false flag terror attacks in its strategy of tension. Vatican and Mafia officials were P2 members, and they both did business through a banker named Roberto Calvi, who was also a P2 member. Roberto Calvi was murdered amidst the scandal, while the bank that he was chairman of collapsed. Freemasonry is itself administered by British royalty. George W. Bush's father, George H. Bush, is a Skull and Bones member, and is a former director of the CIA. When George H. Bush was vice president under Ronald Reagan, then George H. Bush oversaw the brutal foreign policies of the United States within South America, while the CIA also smuggled tons of cocaine out of South America and into the United States. The CIA flew tons of cocaine into Mena, Arkansas, while then Governor Bill Clinton was responsible for approving the state loans that laundered the drug money involved. Bill Clinton was also responsible for the complete suppression of all investigations into the Mena drug smuggling operation, also suppressing investigations after 2 young boys were mysteriously murdered next to the airport at Mena. This CIA drug smuggling operation also flew weapons back into South America, and one of these airplanes crashed in Nicaragua. The sole survivor of that crash confessed to being part of an illegal operation to arm and resupply Nicaraguan Contra fighters, and a scandal that became known as Iran-Contra ensued, since the CIA was also illegally dealing arms with the government of Iran in exchange for hostages. During the congressional hearings into Iran-Contra, questions concerning a secret government plan for martial law procedures emerged. This plan was known as Rex 84, and it had prison camps built all over the United States, to be operated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, in the event of martial law being declared in the United States. Associated plans known as Garden Plot and Cable Splicer also exist, for the respective purposes of emergency population and government control. In 1989, George H. Bush was implicated as part of a criminal sex ring that involved underage male prostitutes visiting the White House late at night. A Republican lobbyist named Craig J. Spence was under investigation for running the Washington sex ring that delivered these prostitutes, and Craig J. Spence was found dead from an alleged suicide before he could ever stand trial. A high-level Republican named Lawrence E. King was supplying children for this criminal sex ring, and Lawrence E. King received these children from a Catholic orphanage in Nebraska called Boys Town. While Boys Town was a client of Lawrence E. King's disgraced credit union, Franklin Trust. Federal and state officials turned the investigation and prosecution against the child rape victims, and America's corporate media also participated in the re-victimization and complete media blackout against these children. This criminal sex ring had also used its victims as drug couriers, and victims also reported involvement in a CIA brainwashing project that has come to be known as Monarch. One of these victims had also described being forced to rape an even younger child, and then witnessed this younger child being murdered. This victim also claimed that he was forced to violate the younger child's corpse, while everything was recorded on videotape. This child rape murder incident reportedly occurred in a wooded area in California, similar in description to the Bohemian Grove. The Bohemian Grove is a male-only encampment, where the most powerful men in America engage in secret rituals every year. The club employs multitudes of male prostitutes, and every year the cremation of care ceremony takes place. During the cremation of care, prominent Bohemian Grove members cover themselves in hooded robes, while they perform a mock child sacrifice to a giant statue of an owl. The Bohemian Grove Club was originally founded on Jesuit land near San Francisco, and St. John of Nepomuc is the patron saint of Bohemian Grove. A large wooden statue of St. John is present at Bohemian Grove as well. The Bush family holds prominent membership. In 1993, the Bush family crime syndicate associate, Bill Clinton, was elected President of the United States. Bill Clinton had belonged to a Masonic youth organization called Demali, and Bill Clinton was also educated at Jesuit-controlled Georgetown University, where he was known to be very close to the faculty. Bill Clinton went on to study as a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University, and the Rhodes Scholarship Program was originally developed to go in sync with the imperialist socialist agenda of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Bill and Hillary Clinton have also attended the U.S. sister organization of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Council on Foreign Relations, and Bill and Hillary Clinton have also attended Bilderberg. Bill Clinton has attended the Bohemian Grove Club as well. In 1993, a group of Christians in Waco, Texas had anticipated a battle with NWO forces, and also the return of Jesus. They lived in their own compound, and they were well armed. This group called themselves the Branch Davidians. When the ATF came to raid their compound, then a firefight ensued, killing 4 ATF agents and 6 Branch Davidians. A 51-day standoff followed, and Bill Clinton was responsible for U.S. military Delta forces being illegally used to handle a United States law enforcement situation. Tanks were driven into the compound, firing CS gas canisters, while commandos exited their vehicles and fired machine guns. Hours later, tanks were again driven into the compound, this time firing flamethrowers. As the compound became engulfed in flames, women and children took shelter inside of a concrete room in the middle of the compound. High-powered explosives were then detonated on the roof of this concrete room, and everyone inside was murdered. Another 80 Branch Davidians were murdered in this entire assault. 2 years later, on the anniversary of the massacre at Waco, a large truck bomb was detonated in front of a federal government building in Oklahoma City. Racist anti-US federal government extremists had detonated this truck bomb, and these extremists had also funded this operation by robbing banks. FBI informants had assisted the extremists in robbing these banks, and the explosives expert who had helped to build this bomb was also an FBI informant. Federal officials were aware of the extremist plan to bomb this federal building, and federal officials had more than likely also placed professional demolition charges within this building as well. The U.S. federal government then blamed these extremists solely, and the U.S. federal government also used this incident to attack the constitutional militia movement, causing it to shrink greatly. The constitutional militia movement had been growing ever since the massacre at Waco, and the constitutional militia movement had absolutely nothing to do with the Oklahoma City bombing. On September 11, 2001, NWO forces murdered 3,000 innocent people in New York City. While hijacked airliners flew towards their targets, most likely guided by remote control. Air defense pilots remained confused, because they were simulating a similar type of attack at the very same time. U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney had taken complete control of air defenses at this time, and Dick Cheney was responsible for issuing the direct orders that resulted in the intentional failures of air defense. After the airliners hit their targets, then the Twin Towers were imploded in controlled demolitions. A third building in the World Trade Center complex was also imploded in a controlled demolition, and this building was known as WTC-7. Throughout this entire attack, Skull and Bones member George W. Bush was responsible for playing the role of United States President, on behalf of his Illuminati masters. The Illuminati had set the stage for and intended World War III, and George W. Bush played right along, while the United States continued to be destroyed. The Patriot Act was signed into law, and George W. Bush was given dictatorial powers as president. The War on Terror was launched, and the Bush regime was able to start imperialist occupations of both Afghanistan and Iraq. Companies such as Halliburton could then make record profits, while the United States was driven ever closer to complete bankruptcy. Preparations for a North American Union were launched, via the secretive Security and Prosperity Partnership, as the Illuminati moved to regionalize the globe, towards their push for one world government. In 2009, a United Nations food code that is known as Codex Alimentarius is set to become international law, through the World Trade Organization. Codex Alimentarius includes extremely high allowances for toxic chemicals, while at the same time placing severe restrictions on, or completely banning, vitamins and minerals, which it classifies as toxins. B.I.G. Farvan scientist Nazi war criminal Fritz Vermeer was the main architect of Codex Alimentarius, and the UN has itself predicted that Codex Alimentarius will lead to a minimum of 3 billion deaths, once it becomes international law.